for almost a full day, and, and so he's from Philadelphia. He is married with 2 sons, a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. He has a great picture of them, if you ever want to see it. So, and their Christmas gear. So he is obviously, I think, an expert in this thing, in this epidemic that is pornography and how it affects everything. You know, really. You'll see he has books in the back called Integrity Restored, which is also a website that he runs that's all about fighting this battle and healing for this. Yes, keep plugging it. $15, I believe, is the cost.
And he'll sign it?
Yes, he will sign it. He loves autograph requests. So, without further ado, Dr. Klopanis. But before I say that, Deacon wanted me to promote, there's a book sale in the back, which is really kind of it supports the youth here at St. John Bosco. It's really a free will donation. So there's that book table in the back. If there's a book you would like, feel free to grab it. But also make a donation if you feel so called. So, without further ado, I'm done talking. Dr. Klopanis.
Thank you very much. I have to apologize, I'm coming off a little bit of a cold here, so if I sniffle through this, please excuse me. So, would anybody here like to begin us with a prayer?
Yes.
Okay.
In my group, we lift our eyes from shame to grace. And so we look at each other and acknowledge our presence in the recovery process that I'm experiencing. In doing so, Heavenly Father, bless this gathering. Open our hearts to your presence. Open our minds to share. Open our souls to grace, the source of our life. We ask this. We expect this, we participate in this, in the name of our God, our Savior, and each other. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for all coming. So today I'm going to be giving you a lot of different facts and research and resources that are going to help you. So let me first start out with some information about our culture and what's going on. You know, research tells us that about 1/3 of the population is crazy, totally nuts. And how do we know this? Well, let's do an experiment. I want you to look to the person to your right, and I want you to look to the person to your left. They look normal? Okay, you're in. How do we establish that? All right, let me tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Dr. Peter Klopanis. I'm a licensed clinical therapist. I am Assistant Director of Comprehensive Counseling Services in Conshohocken, Pennsylvania. Every time I say Conshohocken, someone usually says Gesundheit. So, my background training is in marriage and family therapy, and I've been in practice for over 18 years now. And, you know, people often ask me, how did I get into this work of, you know, pornography addiction recovery? Well, I kind of got into it by accident. When I began my practice, again, over 18 years ago, I made 2 decisions. Number one, I wanted to bring the Catholic faith into the therapeutic process. I thought that was very important. You know, God is the ultimate healer. Psychology is a wonderful tool, but God is the healer. And number 2, I wanted to work with men. I wanted to work with men and all their issues and the things they deal with. And people ask me, well, why do you want to do that? And I say, well, everywhere you go, you hear about women's issues all the time. I say, what about the guys? The guys have issues too. Right, ladies?
Right.
Yeah. So I wanted to work with men. And over the years, I worked with a lot of men. I worked with a lot of couples, families, and so forth. And you know, it was great. I loved it. Well, about 7 years ago, I noticed a big shift in my clientele. More men were coming to me who were struggling with pornography. In fact, for many of the married men, it was actually their wives that were calling and asking for help. So I saw this trend going on. I said, okay, I need to study this. I need to research this and find out what's going on. And I did, and what I discovered is there was a huge epidemic going on of internet pornography addiction. And it was affecting individual lives, it was affecting marriages, families, careers, all that. But nobody wanted to talk about it. Nobody wanted to discuss this or touch it with a 10-foot pole. right? So I kept doing more work, treating more men with this, and working on this as a specialization. And then in late 2009, I got a call from the Archdiocese of New York, from their Family Life Office. They found out about the work that I was doing, and they asked if I would come and give a conference to their clergy. And I said, sure, yeah, I'll come and do that. It was an interesting conference because they have over 1,500 priests in the Archdiocese. We had to do it in 2 sessions. We did it at the seminary, in the gym, and even with that, it was standing room only. And it was great, and this is where the Fighting Corner in Our Culture and Winning conferences were developed. And of course, once you do something for the Archdiocese of New York, it's like playing at Caesar's Palace. Everybody finds out about it. And so other dioceses started calling and asking me to come and do conferences. And so over the past 5 years, almost 6 years now, I've done over 75 conferences all around the country and internationally. So what I like is people are now really finally getting to the point where they want to talk about it, they realize there's a problem, and we're ready to do something about it, and this is wonderful. So today what we're going to do, today's conference is actually a series of 4 talks. The first talk is going to be about understanding the pornography epidemic in America. What's really going on out there? The second talk is going to be about on the path of addiction. How do people become addicted to this stuff? You know, what are the causes of it? The third talk is going to be about the road to recovery. You know, what does that look like and how you can help? And the fourth talk is going to be about protecting families, what we can do for that. And I'm going to talk about narcissism in our culture because that's a big factor in this problem too. So the first 2 talks is about theory, the second 2 is practical application. Right? And you have a packet of handouts there. I'm going to give you a lot of different resources that you can use for this. So, and we will have time for Q&A at the end of each talk. We're going to have a couple coming in, Beth and Stephen, who themselves have, gone through, the whole ordeal of addiction and recovery, and they're going to talk about their wonderful journey to healing and wholeness, which is going to be a wonderful testimony for that. I've got a book for sale. I'll talk more about that. So we're going to have a lot going on here today. So, okay. Now, to start, I want to take a poll. I want you to raise your hand if you have never seen pornography. Okay. We're all on the same page here. And it's quite rare that you're ever going to find anybody who's never seen it because our culture is saturated with pornography. It's everywhere. Right? Why is it everywhere? It sells. Sex sells. It's about the money. And it is a huge industry, and we're going to talk about the billions of dollars it brings in, how it comes in, all of that. Now, but before we can begin talking about it, we have to define it. What is pornography? And it can mean different things to different people. It can be difficult to define. In fact, one former Supreme Court justice once said, when it comes to pornography, I can't define it, but I know it when I see it. So we have to come up with a definition. Now, I have 2 definitions for pornography. The first one is a clinical definition that I use, and the second one actually comes from the Catechism of the Catholic Church. So my definition that I use is pornography is any image that leads a person to use another person for their own sexual pleasure. It's devoid of relationship, love, and intimacy, and it can be highly addictive. Now, the key word in this definition is use. Using another person for your own sexual pleasure. And then what is that? That's lust. Lust, using it. And this is what happens with pornography. When a man is looking at porn, he's looking at that woman, he's not thinking that she's a person with thoughts and feelings. He's not thinking that she is somebody's daughter or wife or mother. He's not thinking about the terrible circumstances that led her into the pornography industry. And believe me, they are terrible. I don't know of any healthy young woman who would ever say she wants to grow up to be a porn star. All he knows is that she is there for his sexual pleasure and he is going to use her. And of course, God didn't create any of his children to be used. But this is what it's about. Another important word in here is image. Now, most of the time when we think of the word image, we think of pictures, photographs, videos. Well, pictures can also be created with words. And there's a lot of erotic literature. How many of you have ever heard of the 50 Shades of Grey books? Anybody? Yeah, okay. That's pornography, right? It's not pictures, but the pictures are created with words. Now, I see a lot of you people furiously writing notes down. I'm going to be sending Sakura my PowerPoint presentations, and she can send them all out to you so you don't have to get writer's cramp. So you can still take notes if you want. So this is the definition that I use, and we'll talk a little more about this. Now, based on this definition, though, does that image have to be of a person who is unclothed? Right? No. Could be anybody. Right? The key here is about using somebody. That's what we have to look at. Now, from the Catechism of the Catholic Church, I have to read this one because it's a long one. The Catechism states that pornography consists in removing real or simulated sexual acts from the intimacy of the partners in order to deliberately display them to third parties. It offends against chastity because it perverts the conjugal act, the intimate giving of spouses to each other. There's no intimacy. There's nothing there, okay? It does grave injury to the dignity of its participants since each one becomes an object of base pleasure and illicit profit for others. Again, it's all about the money. It immerses all who are involved in the illusion of a fantasy world. It is a grave offense. Civil authorities should prevent the production and distribution of pornographic materials. Now, I like this definition because it covers a lot of the bases. Now, this was developed over 20 years ago. If this were to be revised today, it would probably include something about the addictiveness of pornography, because we now know it is an addictive substance. We have the neuroscience evidence that proves this. So, and I'm hoping soon that this is revised because, as you all may know, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops came out with a brand new document, a statement on pornography entitled Creating Me a Clean Heart. So you can go onto the USCCB website, you can read it, it's about 20 pages long. I'm very thrilled because I'm cited in it. I actually had the privilege of proofreading it before they went up for a vote, and they've really done a wonderful job with that. So, you know, hopefully this is going to even make this issue even more prevalent, more people will talk about it. So here we can define it. Now let's talk about some statistics here. So, every second over $3,000 is being spent on pornography. Every second over 28,000 internet users are viewing pornography. Every second 372 internet users are typing sexual terms into search engines. That's Google. And every 39 minutes in the United States, a new pornographic video is being produced. And the largest and fastest growing category of pornography today is amateur porn. People are creating their own pornography at home and they're posting it on the internet. You know, why? Well, there's this thrill, there's sort of this exhibitionistic thrill that people are watching them having sex. Right? But this is what is going on out there. Okay. Let's talk about the money. Right? The pornography industry earns over $100 billion annually worldwide. 13 billion of that alone comes from the United States. It earns more than the top technology companies combined. Whoever thought anybody could earn more than Apple or Microsoft or Amazon? This is combined. Right? This is where it's all coming from. Now, and child porn generates $3 billion a year in the United States. Now you may be wondering, how are they making all this money? Because there's a lot of free porn out on the internet. You can get tons of free stuff out there. How are they doing it? Well, the pornographers know that this is an addictive substance. They know it's a drug. And their goal is to get as many people addicted as possible. So like any good drug addict, what do? They give out samples. So you log onto a pornographic website and they may have several screens of free material. Free pictures, free videos, and so forth. They call them teasers. And they know that with this, they can get a person addicted. Now, once a person is addicted, these teasers, a few minutes of video here and there, are not enough. They want more. And at that point, what they need to do is give the website their credit card number. They subscribe to the website. And from there, they get into the website and they can see more videos and more pictures and all kinds of stuff. Now, it may not be too expensive for the individual consumer, maybe $5 a month to subscribe. But think of it this way. If a pornographer can get just 50,000 people to subscribe to the website, which is not that difficult, at $5 a piece, that's $250,000 a month, and there's $3 million a year. That's what they're doing. And these aren't people like working out of their garages. These are major media companies who are hosting multiple websites, and they're making millions and millions of dollars. And they're doing it because they're getting people addicted. It's no different than the cigarette companies 50 years ago. Same thing. Right? So this is what's going on out there with the money. Let's talk about men and their use of pornography. Or let me back up here. Here's some more statistics. There are currently 4.2 million pornographic websites worldwide, 420 million pornographic web pages, 68 million daily pornogaphic search engine requests. Like I said, 25% of all Google requests are for sexual content. There are 4.5 billion average daily pornographic emails and 100,000 child porn websites worldwide. This is huge. Now I have to tell you, with all these statistics, as sobering as they are, these are probably gross underestimates of what's really going on out there. Because the reality is there's no way we can accurately measure it all. You know, we're talking about the World Wide Web here. It's probably a lot worse than what we're seeing here. Again, now let's talk about the men. Men admitting to accessing pornography at work, 20%. And those are the men that admit to it. What about the men who don't? And there are a lot of men who are losing their jobs because of this. You know, every year companies across the United States lose billions of dollars in lost revenue, lost productivity, because people aren't doing their work, they're watching porn. And a lot of companies now are tightening up their policies on this. They are monitoring their computer systems, right? And they have strict policies. Have any of you heard of the Vanguard mutual funds? Right. They're headquartered not far from where I live. They're the largest employer in our county. They employ over 25,000 employees. They have a very strict policy. You get one warning and then you're fired, right? And they have fired hundreds of people because of this. I've worked with a lot of my clients have worked there. But this is what's happening. It's really hurting careers, you know, and ruining lives that way. U.S. adults who regularly visit internet pornography websites, 40 million. Promise, everybody familiar with the Promise Keepers? It's an evangelical organization of men who are striving to live good Christian lives. Like Promise Keepers who viewed pornography in the last week, 53%.
Oh, wow.
Now you may be wondering, where am I getting my statistics from? Well, I'm getting it from a lot of good, credible resources. The Family Research Council, Focus on the Family, Family Safe Media, Covenant Eyes, the Maryland Coalition on Pornography, Morality in Media. There are a lot of organizations out there who are doing this type of research. Christians who said pornography is a major problem at home, 47%. That was done by Christianity Today. Adults admitting to sexual addiction, 10%. And again, those are the ones who are admitting to it. What about the ones who won't admit to it? What about the people who are addicted and don't even know it, simply because pornography use is so common in our culture? And the breakdown of male to female users, visitors to pornography websites, 72% male, 28% female. Almost a third of all visitors to pornographic websites today are female, are women. It used to be thought that it's just a men's issue and that's all. No, women are getting into this too. And we have to address that also. Okay. So, what are some of the ways that pornography enters our lives? What are some of the ways that people get into it? Anybody? Television? Internet? Magazines?
Well, in Battle Creek, there's a taxi service that has bed reimbursement for one of the men's, you know, the strip.
Strip clubs, yeah.
It's all over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There are many ways. Obviously, we have television. Cable TV, direct TV, satellite TV. We have the internet, right? The number one source for pornography is the internet. We have social media, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, FaceTime, all these forms of, and this is where you're going to see a lot of that amateur pornography. Video games. Now, a lot of parents are concerned about the violence in video games, and this is why they want them rated and everything. Well, I have to tell you, video games are just as pornographic as they are violent. There's a lot of pornography in these video games. Another thing that a lot of parents don't realize is that kids can actually watch internet porn through their video game system. Right? Now, Going back 20, 30 years when I was a kid, when you bought a video game system, you know, the games came as these little cartridges and you had to stick the cartridge in to play the video game. There's no more cartridges. Why? Because the video game system, the Xbox, the Wii, the PlayStation, is connected to the internet. And you just go right into the internet and get the games that you want to play. And this is also what allows a person in Michigan to be playing a video game with someone in Europe at the same time. It's all through the internet. Right? But what a lot of parents know is because that you can tap into the internet and watch pornography, you can watch anything. So I found that out. One of my clients, he found out that his son was viewing pornography when he got his Netflix bill. He thought his son was downstairs in the basement with his buddies playing video games when they were actually watching porn. So this is what can happen. So the video games and the video game systems are sources of pornography. Cell phones, right, or any type of portable device, whether it's a cell phone, an e-reader, a tablet, an iPod, any of those things are very important. In fact, right now, over 50% of all internet pornography is viewed on cell phones. That's where it's coming from. Print media, obviously, advertisements, magazines, catalogs, you know, that Victoria's Secret catalog, the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue, that's still out there. Advertising, we see it a lot, sex sells. Popular music. You look at a lot of the music videos out there, you look at the lyrics to the music. A lot of that is very pornographic. Again, any image that leads a person to use another person for their own sexual pleasure. This is what happens. And clothing today. You know, during the summertime, you look at what a lot of the clothing that young women are wearing, a lot of that can be considered pornographic, and a lot of it is influenced by the porn industry. So these are all the ways that pornography is ending our lives. And why? Again, it's about the money. It's all about the money. It's not about freedom of speech or art or expression. It's about money. Okay. Let's talk about the addictiveness of pornography, because again, we now know that that pornography is just as addictive as alcohol, drugs, gambling, anything else. Right? Why? Well, first of all, there are neuroscience research on it, brain scans. They've compared brain scans of cocaine addicts to sex addicts, and the images are identical. All right, you have the same blood flow to various parts of the brain, the same electrical activity. The pleasure center of the brain and the limbic system is overstimulated, while the impulse control center, the place that lets us to say, stop, I'm going to stop this, that's disconnected. This is what is happening. Now, whenever we look at an addiction, we really have to see it as two sides of a coin. On one side, we have the physical addiction, where the body becomes physically dependent on the drug and needs it just to function in daily life. And if it doesn't get it, there are withdrawal symptoms and so forth. So it craves it. On the other side of the coin, we have the emotional addiction, where the drug is used to ease some type of deep emotional pain going on. Now, how many of you ever heard the term self-medicating? All right, this is what we're talking about, self-medicating. So how do these two sides work together? Well, let's talk about the physical side first. Now, and I'm going to focus right now on men. But the first thing you have to understand is that men and women are wired differently. We are different. We men, we are wired to be visually stimulated. That's it. We know, we see a beautiful girl walk by, we look, it's automatic, you know. This is why I have this little guy out here with his eyes and his tongue bugging out. All right? This is automatic, it's what happens. In fact, the way our brains are set up, there's a structure in our brains called the thalamus, which helps the brain pick out erotic images. So we could be looking at 1,000 different things. If one of them's erotic, the brain's going to pick it out and say, hey, pay attention to this, this is important. Now, when this happens, there is a chemical reaction that occurs in the brain. Several chemicals are released into the brain, which provide an excitement, stimulation, all this. So let me go over them. The first one is dopamine. And this is released into the brain, and when this mixes with testosterone, it affects the brain like a drug. Right? It creates the feeling of excitement. Right? If you want to see this, just go up to any 14-year-old boy and mention the word pornography and watch his eyes light up. Okay? Don't do that. I get enough trouble. All right. It also is responsible for focusing on sex to satisfy the craving. It creates this hyper-focusing. You know, a lot of men will say they'll go online and look at pornography, and before they know it, several hours have gone by and they don't even realize it. Okay? That's what dopamine does. Dopamine is also the drug that points you toward getting that need met. It's the same with food and drink. You know, if you're hungry or thirsty, it's actually dopamine that says you need to go get something to eat. All right? So it creates that craving that's satisfying you. There's another drug, chemical in the brain that's released called norepinephrine. And this hits the brain like an adrenaline, and it ramps it up for sexual activity. It kind of gets it excited for that sexual release. Now, a lot of men will say that whenever they look at an erotic image, it gets burned into their brains and is there for a while. Okay? Norepinephrine is responsible for that. We call it the snapshot chemical. Right? This is why men don't even need to look at pornography to masturbate. All they have to do is close their eyes and they have a whole parade of images that they can use. So norepinephrine is responsible for locking in memories. For example, I'm sure you're all aware of where you were and what you were doing when the World Trade Towers got hit. Okay? Norepinephrine is the chemical that locks in those memories. It also triggers a spike in testosterone, which is responsible for sexual aggression, and it activates the autonomic nervous system. So the heart starts beating faster, breathing gets heavier, some men may begin to sweat. Another chemical called delta phosphate increases that craving for more. It makes you want more and more and more. Okay? So you have all these chemicals going. You know, the largest sex organ in the brain is right between your ears. It's right up here. Okay? Another chemical, serotonin, is released in small packets in the brain, elevating that sense of excitement. And of course, with all this going on, a message is sent down the spinal cord to the genitals for sexual arousal. Now, with all this going on, there is a tension that develops, a physical and an emotional tension that develops that can only be relieved with an orgasm. So the man masturbates. But with the orgasm, opiate chemicals, endorphins, are released into the brain, which provide a sense of euphoria. And after it's all over, there's an intense feeling of relaxation. Now, there are two other chemicals available there. There's oxytocin and vasopressin. These are bonding chemicals. These are what bond people with each other during sex. All right? Both men and women have each of these, but women have more oxytocin, men have more vasopressin. All right? But, you know, in a normal, healthy relationship, it bonds the husband and wife to each other. With pornography, what's it doing? It's bonding the man with a pornographic image. All right? Again, this contributes to that addiction. So what do we have here? The whole process. Let's take the whole train to the end. We have excitement and fantasy, focus, arousal, tension, orgasm, euphoria, relaxation. That is a very powerful drug, and the brain says, wow, this is incredible. You know, this is the greatest feeling in the world. Okay? Because not only do you have what's going up in the brain, you have everything else that's going on that just, you know, reinforces it all. Makes you want to go back for the more. So the brain says, hey, this is great. So from now on, any time we're happy, sad, lonely, angry, scared, bored, burnout, frustrated, ashamed, abandoned, whatever, we're going to go back to this because this is the express train to pleasure. This is the ultimate escape. So, but what happens, again, the brain becomes dependent on it. After a while, as with any addiction, a tolerance develops. All right? So a little isn't enough. You need more of the drug to get the same effect. So what happens is, after a while, that soft porn just doesn't do it. You know, that Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue, the Victoria's Secret catalog. You know, when I was growing up, it was the Sears catalog. You know, or National Geographic. You know, you guys know what I'm talking about. Okay? It's not enough. You need more. So what happens is a man moves on to more hardcore pornography, which include violence, fetishes, even child porn. And he'll spend longer periods of time viewing pornography. Instead of 20 minutes once a week, it could be a couple of hours a day he's viewing this pornography. Why? Because of the tolerance that's developed. You need a harder form of the drug, a stronger form of the drug, and you spend more time pursuing it. Now, eventually, as that tolerance develops, viewing these acts doesn't do it anymore. All right? So then he's going to want to go out and engage in the sexual acts he's seen in pornography. And this is where men may start out to going out to strip clubs. Now, it doesn't surprise me that we're seeing more and more strip clubs opening up across the United States. And you think, well, what kind of a man would go to a strip club? You know, normal, healthy guys wouldn't. And you're right. It's the ones who are addicted to pornography, and looking at the stuff is just not doing it for them anymore. And so they're going out to the strip clubs. And of course, with that, that can lead to seeking out prostitutes, anonymous sex partners, and so forth. All right. This is the progression of the addiction. And this can result in contracting sexually transmitted diseases and even death if it's HIV/AIDS. This is what's going on. And this is really, I tell you, it's having such a devastating effect on marriages. I've had many couples come to me where the wife discovered her husband's addiction because she contracted a sexually transmitted disease. She got it from her husband, who got it from the prostitute or the stripper. Now you can imagine how devastating this is. Right? This is going on, right? More than you think. Now, in addition to the tolerance, a dependence develops. The brain gets so accustomed to operating at such a high level of chemical stimulation that it needs to maintain that just to function in life. Right? And if it doesn't get that regular fix, there can actually be withdrawal symptoms. Depression, headaches, anxiety, stomach aches, insomnia, irritability, poor concentration. These are valid withdrawal symptoms. Several years ago, I was working with a teenager. He was a high school senior, and he was just beginning his recovery process. And one day he came into my office and he said, "Dr. Klopanis, I don't understand this. I feel like I'm walking around with a constant hangover." Yeah, it was withdrawal. That's what he was. In fact, what he was really experiencing was detox. His brain was detoxing from all those chemicals. This is what happens, you know, in the brain with this process. Now, you may be thinking, okay, well, this is what's going on, you know, with pornography. You know, what about when, you know, a man is having sex with his wife? I mean, doesn't the same thing happen? Yes, it does, but not to this degree. All right, and why? Because with his wife, that experience is tempered by a relationship, by intimacy. And I compare it to fire. You know, with pornography, there's no intimacy, there's no relationship, there's nothing. Right? It's fun, it's exciting, but there's nothing else. So viewing pornography is like lighting a match. It flares up quickly, gets really bright, and then burns up fast. Doesn't satisfy. In a healthy marital relationship, that sex is like building a slow-burning fire. It grows and gets bigger and bigger. It's not as thrilling or as exciting, but it's far more satisfying. That's what the sexual relationship is about. It's not simply about how can I get the greatest orgasm. It's about deepening the relationship physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all of that. That's what it's about. Right? But the porn industry has fed us this line that says, no, it's all about your own personal, physical, sexual pleasure, and that's all it's about. Okay? And this is what we're seeing here in pornography. I also say, you know, in a marriage is like running your engine on gasoline. With pornography, it's like running on rocket fuel. You know, yeah, you'll blast off, but you'll burn out. That's what's happening. Now let's talk about the other side of the coin, the emotional addiction. Now, most men, when they think of pornography, they just think, well, every man does it, it's a guy thing, it's adult entertainment, what's the big deal? But what really might be happening is they're using pornography to subconsciously ease the pain of deep emotional wounds. You know, often they get into it during their teenage years, usually out of curiosity. You know, you're getting into puberty, you're interested in girls and everything, you want to know about sex. You know, you're not being taught the facts at home, you're not really getting it at school, so what do? You go to pornography. But he discovers pornography, and this little voice deep down inside says, hey, this makes us feel good. This is the ultimate escape from all of our problems. So let's keep going back to this. And because the effects are temporary, he has to keep going back to it over and over and over again. Well, the more he does it, the more he becomes emotionally dependent on that drug to keep that pain at bay. Okay? And the more he keeps going back to keep that emotional pain at bay, the more the physical side also has a chance to really kick in. And here's where they both work together. All right? So, what are some of the common wounds, those deep emotional wounds that can lead a person not only into pornography, but to keep going back to it over and over and over again. I'm going to do a brief overview of this. On my next talk, we're going to get into these a little more deeply. But we have selfishness and narcissism. I mean, that's a big problem in our culture today. The big focus today is on personal happiness. Me, me, me. All right? Deep family of origin wounds in the family, abuse, death, divorce, addiction in the family, loneliness, male insecurity, poor body image, marital conflicts, excessive pressures in life, a weak spiritual life, perfectionism, grief, anger, mistrust of women or men, a lack of a sense of fulfillment in life, a lack of sexual confidence. Now, these deep emotional wounds lead a person to adopt 5 faulty core beliefs. And they are, number 1, I'm unworthy of being loved. Number 2, if people really knew me, they would reject me. Number 3, I cannot trust anyone, including God, to meet my needs. So therefore, number 4, I need to find something that I can control that will meet my needs. And therefore, number 5, pornography and sex is my greatest need and source of comfort. And this is common with any addiction out there. You know, you could take out pornography and sex there, and you could replace it with drugs, alcohol, gambling, food, shopping, TV, video games, model trains. That's a big thing this time of year. Any of these things. Okay? And this is what it's about. And it's interesting because, you know, when we look at pornography addiction, 99.99999% of the time, it's not about sex. It's not about sex at all. It's a drug that is really self-medicating some deep wounds. In fact, many experts today refer to sexual addiction really as an intimacy disorder, because that's what they're really craving. You know, you look at the number 1, I'm unworthy of being loved. Number 2, if people really knew me, they would reject me. Right? How can a person ever experience true love and true intimacy if these are their core beliefs? This is what we're dealing with here. So from this is the addiction cycle. I'm sorry if you can't read this too clearly, but let me kind of explain it. This first circle up at the top here is emotional wounds and shame. All right? These lead to adopting the faulty core beliefs. These lead to acting out sexually, and of course that results in shame, guilt, and despair, and that goes back and feeds in those emotional wounds and shame. It's a vicious cycle. And as I said before, this happens with any addiction at all. Right? And this is what we have to look at it. You know, it's just like, you know, alcoholism 80 years ago. You know, it wasn't looking at it as a moral failing, but looking at it as a disease. We have to look at this as a disease that needs treatment. Okay? So, let's now talk about women in porn, because I said before, this is a growing problem for women. Right? Women who keep their cyber activities a secret, 70%. Women struggling with pornography addiction, 17%. Right now, when we look at all pornography addicts, 83% of them are men and 17% are women. I think it's actually higher than that for women. I really do. So the ratio of women to men favoring chat rooms 2 times. Percentage of visitors to adult websites are women, 1 in 3. Like I said, about a third of them are women. Women accessing adult websites each month, 9.4 million. And women admitting to accessing pornography at work, 13%. Now for women it's different. You know, for men it's easy to identify because, you know, they're looking at these pictures in their videos. For women it's different. It's more subtle and a little more difficult. And here's why. Again, we have to go back to the fact that men and women are wired differently. Right? Women are not as visually stimulated as men. Sure, a woman likes to look at a handsome man, but she doesn't go crazy over like men go over women. Right? Women are more relationally stimulated. They are looking for relationship. This is what gets the chemicals going in their heads. The dopamine, the serotonin, norepinephrine, delta-phosphate, all that. That's what gets those chemicals moving for them. So they will prefer a fantasy world where they can take part in a relationship. This is where women like romance novels, soap operas, chick flicks, reality TV, things like that. Okay? It's about the relationship. And this, women are far more relationally oriented than men. In any family, who are the people that remember the birthdays and the anniversaries? Right? It's the women. Who are the ones that plan the holidays and vacations and all that? It's the women, because it's about relationship. So what happens is their form of pornography often comes in the form of social media, where they're getting into chat rooms, Facebook, blogs, erotic stories, things like that. Right? This is what they're getting into. For the example, you look at a chat room. You get into a chat room, you start typing, and you communicate to people through typing. And you have this long conversation going on. And it's very sexual, very erotic, very pornographic. Right? What's happening there is they're engaging in a relationship, this fantasy relationship. It's like they're creating their own romance novel, and they're the heroines. And this is where they become addicted into it. Okay? Now, again, so the women can become addicted to electronic romantic relationships just as men become addicted to the erotic images. Now, what's dangerous about this is studies have shown that women are actually more likely to be willing to go out and meet the men that they've encountered online. So a woman may go out thinking she's going to have this wonderful romantic rendezvous at a local hotel with this great guy she met online, when in reality she's meeting up with a serial rapist or a murderer. And this has happened a lot. So this is what, you have to realize, this is what women are becoming addicted to. Right? However, there is a disturbing trend. We are finding more women, particularly young women, teenagers, women in their 20s, who are becoming addicted to the visual pornography like men are viewing. And to me this is scary, because it tells me that our pornified culture, it's like it's rewiring women's brains to be more like men, to be more masculine, to be more aggressive. Right? And to me this is a difficult thing. In our culture we see men are becoming feminized and women are becoming masculinized. There's a problem here. There's a big problem. We're messing with natural law. So you have to be aware of it. So, particularly among young women, you're going to find them getting more into the visual pornography now. That's what we're starting to see. But we still see the addiction. It still has the effect on the brain with the chemicals leading to orgasm. And of course, it's the orgasm that reinforces it. Right? So that's what we're looking at in the women. Okay? Okay, let's talk about husbands and wives. So let me throw this out to my audience here. When a woman discovers her husband viewing pornography, how does it make her feel?
Betrayed.
Betrayed, inadequate, belittled. Anything else? Okay. Good, yeah. Betrayed, all right? For a wife, this is as serious as an extramarital affair. This is adultery. And they feel very hurt, very deeply wounded, very betrayed. All right? This is just an awful deep wound. It makes them feel unattractive and sexually undesirable. Right? Because let's face it, the women in porn are generally between the ages of 18 and 25. And thanks to multiple plastic surgeries, digital enhancements, and makeup, they really don't exist in real life. But they're there. And let's say you have a wife, she may be in her 40s, she's been married 15, 20 years, she's had several children. She's very beautiful, but she's not 18 anymore, and she knows it. And she sees what her husband is viewing online, and she thinks to herself, he must think I'm ugly. I've lost my beauty, I'm undesirable. He wants to replace me with these young girls. Right? This cuts to the core of a person. This is such a deep wound. I can't explain how deep this is. It's unbelievable. And they think they can't compete. How can I compete? How can I compete with these women? Right? And they view their husbands as untrustworthy and weak role models. How can my husband be a good role model for our kids if he's viewing this stuff? She may think to herself, if my husband is looking at this stuff online, is he going to allow our teenage sons to view porn online? Or even worse, if he's looking at these young girls in porn this way, is he going to look at our teenage daughters this way? This is what women think. Some women experience symptoms of extreme trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder. I've seen this, there's actually a new name for it now, we call it betrayal trauma. right? That we often when I work with couples, there are actually 3 types of counseling that I need to do. I work with the husbands in their recovery from this addiction. I work with wives to help them recover from the trauma, the betrayal trauma, and then I work with the couple to help restore their marital relationship. Right? This is what is happening. You know, I'm convinced that if men really knew how deeply this would hurt their wives, they would never want to go near any of this stuff. Never, okay? Because we talk about men and their deep wounds that lead to the addiction. I think the women suffer far more as victims. It can lead to severe marital problems and even divorce. You know, the American Association of Matrimonial Attorneys, also known as divorce lawyers, did a study on this back in 2004, and what they found is that pornography plays a significant role in 56% of all divorces. Probably higher than that too. Right. Now, a lot of men, they come to me and they say, Dr. Kokonis, I don't understand it. I know what I did was wrong. I never wanted to hurt my wife. Believe me, I would never do it again. But she just can't let go of it. She can't forget it. She just can't put it behind and move on. She keeps bringing it up over and over and over again. What's going on? And I say, well, 2 things. Number 1, this is the trauma. This is trauma. This is what happens. You talk about, you know, people coming back from combat that have flashbacks. Yeah, this is the trauma. And number 2, you have to look at the way that men and women are wired differently. We men, we have the ability to compartmentalize our lives. Right? So a man can say, yeah, I look at pornography, but that's only 1% of my life. The other 99% is great. I work hard, I pay the bills, you know, I take care of the house, I take my wife out on dates, I walk the dog, I'm at my kid's baseball game, I mow the lawn. It's great. And let's face it, if you get a 99 on a test, that's an A, isn't that? Right? Women don't look at it that way. Women don't compartmentalize. Women are more contextual. A woman looks at her life as if it's one giant bucket of water, and everything's in the bucket. Her marriage, her kids, the career, the house, the dog, her mother, her sister, her friends, church, everything is all mixed in there. And her husband's use of pornography is like one tiny drop of black ink. Not much compared to that bucket of water. But when you put it into that bucket, it clouds everything. Every area of their life it affects. Now eventually, the ink can settle to the bottom and things get clear again, but it can easily be stirred up again, over and over again, all right? It takes a long time for a wife to heal from this, because this is what's going on there, you know? For men, the pornography are just images on a computer screen. That's all they are. It means nothing. But to women, those aren't images. Those are people. Those are other women. And I've had so many wives tell me, they say, you know, I could deal with it if it was drugs or alcohol. I could deal with that. This is very difficult to deal with. Because how do you confront all those other women? How do you compete with all that? Right? You can't. It's very difficult. It's not impossible. And women, you know, to this afternoon, you're going to talk to a couple that have healed from it. But what I'm saying here is men need to be aware of how this does hurt women. So what is the damage to marriage and family? Well, there's this delusional belief that fantasy is better than authentic love. There's a growth in selfishness, which is a major enemy to marital love. There's a failure to understand and appreciate the beauty and sacredness of marital love. There's a lack of refinement and self-giving to the romantic friendship and spousal love. A diminished communication with one's spouse. There's sadness, anger, and a diminished ability to trust for the offended spouse. It harms marital intimacy, increases loneliness and anger, creates a disordered view of beauty, goodness, the human person, and sexuality, increases vulnerability to adultery, and it can lead to marital separation and divorce. So ultimately, no good comes out of this stuff. None whatsoever. And I'll tell you, I often get very angry because there are people in my own profession, in the mental health profession, that would often recommend that couples view pornography to help them with their sex life. It doesn't work. I want to punch those people in the face. Right? And ultimately, it can weaken spiritual life. Okay. Now, porn in the bedroom, every now and then you'll see guys, they'll go to their wives and they'll say, honey, let's look at pornography together. We'll spice up our sex life, we'll learn some new things, and it'll be fun. Well, rarely does this ever work, all right? First of all, Women are not visually stimulated like men. They look at this porn and they say, this is disgusting. What does he get out of it? I don't get it. Right? She may go along with him just to please him. Right? And there are women that'll do that, but they don't really like it. Okay? But it never helps the marriage. Often what ends up is the wife is manipulated or coerced in committing sexual acts that are degrading and even physically dangerous. Right? It does not help. And it separates sex from the unitive and procreate act. You know, what pornography does, it presents sex as just a physical activity based on individual pleasure. You know, it's all about getting the best orgasm. But the fact is, as I said before, sex is all about, it's physical, it's emotional, it's spiritual. You know, it's about deepening that marital intimacy. You know, every time a couple engages in this sexual act, they're renewing their marital vows. They're renewing that covenant with each other and with God. This is what it's about. This can never happen in this situation here. And again, this leads just to great disappointment. All right. Let me talk about the damage of pornography to young men, young women, and children. Because this is what we're seeing, and they're the most vulnerable in our culture at this point. So for young men, this is teenagers, men in their 20s and so forth, we have to ask, what is the message they're getting from pornography? What's the message? And it's very simple. Women are there solely for their sexual pleasure. They don't need to be respected or valued. Women love sex. They want it all the time. They can't get enough of it. They never say no. They beg for it. The sex portrayed in pornography is normal and healthy. And that sex and porn should be a part of any relationship. This is what they're learning. I mean, kids as young as 12, 13, that's what they're learning. Right? And this is what's leading kids to become sexually active at younger and younger ages. And not only that, they're engaging in more dangerous forms of sexuality because of this. It leads to an involvement in a fantasy world that undermines their ability to communicate and relate to women in a healthy manner. And we found that young men today, they don't know how to talk to women, they don't know how to relate, they don't know how to respect. Right? It interferes with the development of a healthy personality. Why? Because it fosters selfishness, right? Just using other people. It harms our ability to understand and want to make a loving commitment in marriage. There have actually been a couple of different studies done with college men. And what they found is these college men, the ones who are regular users of pornography, don't want to get married. They don't. They think that true happiness and fulfillment in life is going to come from having multiple sex partners. That's what they think. Right? And it fosters the hookup culture, or the sexual utilitarian philosophy. What is that? It's simply the idea that it's okay to use other people for your own sexual pleasure. And a lot of young people are doing this, men and women. Particularly on college campuses, they're coming together and they're creating relationships solely for the purpose of having sex. It's called friends with benefits. That's all. Nothing emotional, nothing at all. And of course the men love it because they're getting all this sex. Why do women do it? Because they think they're going to get a relationship out of it. They think if I give him sex, we'll develop a relationship. Does it happen? No. Right? And women just end up leaving and feeling very hurt, betrayed, disrespected, and used. Right? And it results ultimately in a sexual obesity. And what is that? That's a life that's simply consumed by the pursuit and the use of pornography and sex. That's all it's about. This is what is happening to our young men. Ultimately, it leads to severe loneliness, depression, social anxiety, and a profound weakness in confidence. This is what they're seeing. Let's talk about the damage to young women out there. And again, we ask the question, what is the message that they are getting from pornography? And it's simple. In order to be loved, valued, and desired by a man, one must look and act like a porn star. And they're buying into that. A young woman looks at herself in the mirror and says, wow, I'm hot, I'm just like a porn star. This is great. And you have beautiful women who don't look like porn stars and they think there's something wrong with them. They come to believe that sex and porn must be a part of a relationship. Do they really want it? No, but they think this is what has to happen. That the sex portrayed in porn is normal and healthy, and they should enjoy it, even if it is painful or damaging, physically damaging. And again, some girls feel pressure to send their boyfriend nude pictures, sexting. And we see this a lot going on, particularly among middle schoolers today. Right outside, near where I live, there's a middle school where they actually arrested 4 kids for sexting. All all right? Because it ended up turning into a whole cyberbullying thing, and it was just a big mess. But this is what is going on. This is what young women are buying into. According to the APA, that's the American Psychological Association, the sexualization of women leads to girls and young women feeling bad about themselves. There is evidence that sexualization contributes to impaired academic performance and can contribute to body dissatisfaction, eating disorders, low self-esteem, depression, and even physical health problems in high school-age girls and young women. In addition to leading to feelings of shame and anxiety, sexualizing treatment and self-objectification can generate feelings of disgust towards one's physical self. Girls may feel they are ugly and gross. Now this is from the APA's Task Force on the Sexualization of Girls back in 2007. And I have to tell you, studies like this have been going on for the past 40 years. And they always come up with the same results of how sexualizing young women hurts them. But yet, we keep doing it. Why? For the money. It's all about the money. So women are reduced to sex toys for men. Men are portrayed as predatory and masterful, never as gentle and considerate lovers. And that's true. When you look at most pornography, it's really violence toward women. It's usually one or more men who are using a woman in a sexually violent way. That's what it's about. In fact, there's a wonderful researcher named Gail Dines, and she wrote a great book called Pornland. And in it, she has studied the pornography industry. She's a sociologist. She's talked to current and former porn stars, directors, producers, all of that, to really uncover the darkness of the porn industry. And she has a great quote in her book. She says, in pornography, men don't make love to women, men make hate to women. That's what they're doing. Right? And the American Psychological Association makes the vital point that sexualization practices may function to keep girls in their place as objects of sexual attraction, significantly limiting their free thinking and movement in the culture. Right? The sexual revolution did not liberate women. It only enslaved them more. So that's what's going on in marriage prep. We have to address this issue of pornography in marriage preparation classes. You know, a lot of programs do a good job of addressing things like drugs and alcohol and gambling. We have to address pornography. This is the new drug of choice. It's the new thing. We have to address it. You know? And you know, if a man is unwilling to address or resolve this conflict, a young woman should reconsider marriage. We would not want a woman marrying an active alcoholic or drug addict or gambling addict. Why would we want her to marry an active porn addict? We have to address it. Now, a lot of programs are starting to address this. There's a test that they give called the Focus Test. They just added a new section on pornography in there. So, but we do need to do more to add that into these programs. Let's talk about children and pornography. And to me, this is scary. Because the average age today when a child first encounters internet pornography is 8. That's how young. 80% of 15 to 17-year-olds have had multiple exposures to hardcore porn. And the largest single population of internet pornography users are 12 to 17-year-olds. They're the largest, the teenagers. And where are they doing it? On the cell phone, the tablets. That's where they're getting it. All right? They're the ones most at risk. And I work with young kids, teenagers who are addicted. All right? 89% of all solicitations of youth in chat rooms are of a sexual nature, and 29% of 7 to 17-year-olds would freely give up their addresses online. You know, what gets me in the Catholic Church, they're all about safe environment. You have the safe environment programs, Veritas, all that, and of course every teacher, every person who's working in a parish with youth and kids, you all have to have this training on safety and everything. But I have to tell you, the sexual predators, they're not hanging out in the schoolyard. They're not in the schools, they're not in the parishes, they're online. That's where they are. And I said, in addition to training, you know, parish workers, employees, we need to train the parents out there on how to protect their kids online, because this is where they are. Right? So what is the damage of pornography to children? Well, it robs them of their innocence. It brings them into a world that they are not ready to understand. Their brains have not developed to the point where they can truly understand what's going on. Right? So it leaves them with a very distorted view of sexuality. It promotes that sexual utilitarian philosophy. It teaches boys that it's okay to use women. And it teaches girls that men are violent and cannot be trusted. Why? Well, because most pornography is simply violence toward women. Right? And what we find often is that children will imitate the behavior they view in adult porn with other children. Here's where you hear stories of 11-year-old boys raping 7-year-old girls. Right? This is where they're getting it. In fact, I believe that young children being exposed to pornography is a form of child sexual abuse. Think of it this way. You have a 7-year-old girl, and she is left alone with a device, a tablet, cell phone, computer, or whatever, and of course she's curious, so she goes on and wants to play with it. And she gets on there, and somehow she gets into a pornographic video where she sees a woman being raped by half a dozen men. Now, we as adults can look at that and say, okay, this is disgusting, but we know that they're acting. We hope they're acting. But for that 7-year-old girl, she has just witnessed a violent gang rape. Right? You talk about trauma. This is it. And there are children out there who exhibit symptoms and signs of having been sexually abused when they've never been touched by anybody. It's from what they've encountered online in that pornography. We have to protect our children from this stuff. Okay? An extensive study on hardcore adult porn was done by moralityandmedia.org, which shows how it contributes to the sexual exploitation of children. Right? They have another website called pornharms.com, which is a good one. And it contributes to the exploitation of children. It contributes to a lot of sex trafficking out there. It really does. You know, a lot of that pornography, a lot of the women in porn are not there because they want to be, they're forced to. You know, there are people that will go to foreign countries, they'll tell the women, yeah, you can come to America, we'll get you a green card, we'll give you a job, you can start a whole new life. But what these women don't know is when they get to the United States, they're forced into the sex trades as strippers, prostitutes, and porn stars. Right? This is what's happening. For many perpetrators, there's a progression from viewing adult porn to child porn. Perpetrators will often use pornography to groom their victims. You have a man, he finds a young 13-year-old boy who's very lonely, very insecure. He says, come over to my house, we'll drink beer and we'll watch porn. Well, what 13-year-old boy wouldn't jump on a chance to do that? But it's a way of grooming the perpetrator. And where are they meeting? Online. I said, not in the parish, not in the schoolyard, online. Let's talk about the damage to spiritual life. Pope John Paul II wrote, the problem with pornography is not that it reveals too much of the person exposed in the image, but that it reveals too little of the person. The person in the image is reduced to their sexual organs and sexual faculties and is thereby depersonalized. Bishop Laverde wrote, this plague stalks the souls of men, women, and children, ravages the bonds of marriage, and victimizes the most innocent among us. It obscures and destroys people's ability to see one another as unique and beautiful expressions of God's creation, instead darkening their vision, causing them to view others as objects to be used and manipulated. Those who engage in such activity deprive themselves of sanctifying grace and destroy the life of Christ in their souls. So this is what is going on out there in the world with pornography. It's pretty scary what's going on there. And unfortunately, most people don't want to talk about it. There was a recent study done that found that only about 12% of parents really know what their kids are doing online. Most of them don't. They don't. And we have to be vigilant about it. We have to understand what pornography is, the addictiveness of it, how it is affecting individual lives, marriages, families, all of this. We have to be aware of that. Okay. I'm going to do a shameless plug back there, but in my book, Integrity Restored, it's Integrity Restored, Helping Catholic Families Win the Battle Against Pornography. I talk more about this, but also what we can do about it. So there is hope here. Okay. All right, now that your heads are spinning, some of you have glazed over looks on your eyes, are there any questions that you have? Yes?
Why is there a move for the hardcore porn, a move from adult to the child?
Good question. Why do people move from adult porn to child porn? Well, as the tolerance develops, you need a stronger form of the drug, which leads them to seek out more deviant forms of pornography, something more shocking. And it's not that these people are pedophiles, they're really not. But they need a more shocking, stronger form of the drug. And this is why they go from the vanilla sex to the things that are more deviant. And it can include child porn, bestiality, Many different types of things, all kinds of fetishes, yeah. I won't get into them here because I know we're going to have lunch soon. Any other questions? Yes?
Somewhere during your discussion, would you talk about a relationship between pornography and homosexuality?
Yes, I will. We'll get into that. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, well, let's take about a 10-minute break. We'll come back at around 10 of, and we're going to get into the next talk where we're going to talk about